bit of people today. I see Sammy's on the call. Hi, Sammy. Sammy's my fellow Microsoft colleague, is going to be helping us with questions today.
Hi, Sammy.
I hope I'm saying that name right.
Hi, Sammy.
Give a little, maybe 1 more minute.
Hi, Sammy.
Let's all just say hi, Sammy.
It says they're unmuted, so I don't know. Oh well.
Might not be joined on audio because I don't think the mic is showing, so that might be no microphone.
Fancy radio mic going on here.
Oh, John, so before we start, I saw in your bio that you're a cat parent. Would you like to elaborate on the said cat?
I will do so on the slide. I do actually have a slide for this.
Okay.
So, great question, Kevin.
I'm very excited for that slide.
There's not a whole lot of pictures there, so I just thought it's just me. Probably should have put in cat pictures now that I think about it. Anyway, so I think we can get started. Hello, everyone. Good morning if you're on the Pacific, on the West Coast, and good evening if you're in India. Welcome to this workshop on Azure for Students for SFX 2021. My name is Jon Kotker. My pronouns are he, him. So before we jump in, I thought it'd be good to talk about what we're going to talk about. So the agenda for today, we're going to start off with a little bit about me. I will not miss the opportunity to, boast a little. I'm also going to talk mostly about Azure for the rest of this workshop. And then I'm going to go through a couple of demonstrations on how to use the API if you haven't had a chance to work with it yet. And then I'm going to leave some time at the end for questions and answers with both me and my colleague, Sammy, who's also on the call. So if that sounds good, let's get started. So a little bit about me. So I'm a senior software engineer on the PowerPoint team. Microsoft itself is headquartered in Redmond, but PowerPoint is in Sunnyvale, California. I'm a queer person of color. I'm a parent of 2 cats, one of whom is not happy about the other. I'm also a linguophile, so my life goal is to try to learn as many languages as I can. I'm also an enthusiast in machine learning, which is what you're going to see a little bit of later today when we demo some of the Azure APIs. And my secret superpower is that on Halloween, I'm a good lookalike for our CEO. So that was a picture taken from a couple of years ago during our Halloween party. All I had to do was put on a hoodie and glasses. Anyway, so that's a little bit about me. Let's talk a little bit about the company. So Microsoft's mission, as you might be aware, is that we want to empower every person and every organization on the planet to achieve more. And so as part of that mission statement, one of the things that we have available and that we're making available is something called Azure. So what is Azure? Let's talk a little bit about that. So Azure is a cloud computing service that Microsoft creates and hosts. So essentially, we have set up a service on the cloud, which is our computers, that you can talk to for any number of things. For instance, you can use Azure to build powerful web apps with your favorite language. So we support C#, I believe, we support Java, we support Python, we support a whole host of languages, and you can use Azure to build these powerful web apps. You can also train models for any of your projects that involve machine learning. So if you have some experience in machine learning and you're like, all right, I want to make my own models, great, you can use Azure to train some of those models. However, if you also are a beginner in machine learning, don't worry. We already have a couple of services available for you to use. You can use some of our existing APIs for a whole host of things, including face detection, sentiment analysis. I recently used one for translation and also for video editing. And so you can use those as well. And if you don't want to do any of that, all you want to do is have a database sort of application. That's fine. We also allow you to store large amounts of structured and unstructured data on Azure. And we can do so much more. So essentially, we're setting up a whole host of computers for you to use for whatever you want to use. All right. So where do you, the hacker, start? Well, so if you're a student, you are eligible for $100 of free Azure credit for every 12 months that you are a student. So you can keep renewing it every year. And so in order to do that, you would go to aka.ms/sfhacksazure. Again, that's aka.ms/sfhacksazure to activate your free $100 credit towards Azure. Note that it's not actually $100 of money, it's credit to use on Azure because some of our payment plans require the use of credit. So if you go to aka.ms/sfhacksazure, you're going to get some credit. So where can you learn more about how to use Azure? Again, you can go to aka.ms/sfhackseducation to access what we have, an education hub with content that is very specific to beginners and students. So if you go to aka.ms/sfhackseducation, you can access our education hub and you can see some of that student-specific content. We're going to go through some of that today. You can also check out some of the quick start templates that we have available to get a head start in your development. I'll also show you that in a bit. But essentially, we have, for a lot of different use cases, we have templates that you can just click and deploy, and bam, you're ready to go. We're going to be listening to questions, and we have been listening to questions in the Microsoft-specific Discord channel, best use of Microsoft API. So feel free to post questions there, including after this talk, and we can answer them. So what are we looking for? So our category is the best use of Azure. And so if your project ends up making the most impactful use of Azure, your team wins these very fancy adventure packs for your outdoor travels. So every member of your team will win these. All right, so enough chatter. Let's actually go into a bit of a demonstration. Let's see if I can pull this up. So I'm gonna stop sharing this particular screen. So I'm going to lay all my cards here on the table. I'm also a relative beginner to Azure. So I'm going to approach this as a relative beginner with, which I would imagine is a whole host of hackers today. So let me see if I can pull that up. Oops. Okay. So I'm going to share my screen now. Wow. Okay. All right. Let me know when you all see this. Okay. Awesome. All right, so this is what you get when you go to aka.ms/sfhacksstudent. So sorry, sfhacksazure. So if you go to aka.ms/sfhacksazure, you should see a page where you can get credit towards using Azure. So if you click on Activate Now, all you will need is an actual email address associated with some educational institution, and bam, you get $100 of credit that you can use. If you go to aka.ms/sfhackseducation, you come to our fancy education hub. So this is great. It was also great for me when I was first using this because you have these, what we call quick start templates. By the way, is the text on the screen good for everyone? Should I make this larger? Okay, I'm seeing a lot of nods. Feel free to react as well. I can see them. So yeah, I have a bunch. We have a bunch of quick start templates that we can use. So I'm going to use our Cognitive Services API, which is essentially our API for all of our machine learning applications, including vision related things, translation related things, and all that. So I'm going to deploy a universal API because, as you can see, it uses the Cognitive Services right there. So let's click deploy. Ooh, Azure. Loading. Okay, so once we're there, I already have signed up for an Azure for Students subscription from aka.ms/sfhacksazure. So I'm going to make it as part of I'm going to make this deployment as part of a resource group. You can think of a resource group as sort of a folder with a bunch of files that you can put in. So I'm going to create a new one specifically for today. I'm going to call it SFHacks 2021 because I stand it. Okay. And then I can specify where I want my computers to live. It doesn't really matter where it is for small applications, but if you're concerned about distance to the nearest data center, I would say I'm closest to the west of US. And everything else looks good. I'm going to review it and create it. And then once I create it, I think it should be getting deployed. So it's going to say deployment is in progress. So while that's happening, I'm going to show you all the various things you can do in Azure. So you can do a machine learning application. You can set up a database on there. You can set up a bunch of Linux virtual machines as well. You can set up an Internet of Things hub. Oh, wow, there is so much more. Wow. There's actually a whole lot of things you can do with Azure today. So let me go check with my deployment if it's still going. It is complete. All right. So now I'm going to go to my resource straight up. And thankfully, there's a quick start tab that I can use to just get started. So I mentioned at the top of this presentation that I'm a linguophile. So I'm curious how I can use our translation API. So step 3, skipping the first 2, because I'm an engineer and don't read documentation, I'm going to go straight to translator. Okay. And it's going to give me a bunch of documentation. Now, all of this is super useful. I think there's one for everything. You can do one for language understanding. There's a whole host of documentation. There's a documentation for all various things you might want to do. I found it supremely useful when I was working. So I'm just going to go to the translator documentation. So I'm going to, where was that? I'm going to quick start. Okay, get started with translator. All right, so prerequisites. I need an Azure subscription. Great, we already gave that to you, aka.ms/sfhacks-azure. And then once you have that, you can set up a resource, which we just did. Okay, and now for the rest of this demo, I'm going to use Python. But note that there are other languages that we're giving you code samples for. There's C#, there's Java if you're so interested. There's Node.js if you're so inclined. But because Python, I'm more used to Python, and hopefully it's a little bit understandable even if you don't have background in the language. I'm going to use that for today. But bear in mind that there are other languages that you can use as well. So here is a sample to translate text. Oh, cool. This looks useful for me. I'm going to copy it. Ta-da. Okay, now I'm going to go to my editor, and I'm going to paste it. Sweet. Okay, so let's go through this line by line, or chunk by chunk. So I have a bunch of things I want to import. Okay, great. I have a bunch of libraries I need to import for Python. It's asking me for my subscription key. I don't actually know where my subscription key is. Let's go find it. So I'm going to go into my subscription key. Notice that I had earlier made this resource. Now there's a key and endpoint. Great. So I have 2 keys that I can use. So I'm going to copy the first key here. I'm going to paste it. Okay, great. All right. The endpoint doesn't need to change. Add my location. Okay. Do I have access to the location? I do. Remember earlier I mentioned that it was West US. So I'm just going to go back and click on that. It's right there for me to use. Thank you, Microsoft. West US. And now I have a bunch of code that does a bunch of stuff. So the key thing to realize here is that this is a service. So you have an endpoint that you can ask questions of. So think of it as like a website that you can send requests to. So this is a service that you can send requests to, and there's a certain path on that particular website that is specifically for translation. And you have to provide a bunch of parameters to it. So according to the documentation, which I will not read out here, but I'll just give you a brief summary of, I'm going to translate from English to, in this case, it's German and Italian. And then I can provide what exactly I want to translate here in the text. So I'm going to say, hello world, I am hacking today in SF Hacks. Will you join me? Okay. All right. So I'm going to save that out. And then this is the one that actually sends the request to the service. So there's a service on Azure that is a translation service, and it's expecting requests. And here on lines 33 and 34, which I've highlighted, that's where it actually receives the request and sends a response. So let's see if I can run this code. So I'm going to go Python translator demo. I think I called the file. Cool. Oh, sorry. I guess I didn't call it that. Let me say, what was it? Translation demo. Aha. I'm waiting for the service to, there we go. So now I got a bunch of my translations. So remember that my text was, hello world, I'm hacking at SF Hacks today. Will you join me? Here it is in German. I'm not even going to try to speak it because my German accent is horrible. But there's German and there's Italian. And there's a whole host of other languages that you can use as well. So it's really simple to get up and running for a translation service. Are there any questions about this that I can take? Feel free to raise your hand or put it in the chat. If not, that's fine. I can go ahead. I'll also have some time near the end for any questions that you might have. But that's how you can use a translation service. There are other things that I could probably do. Let's see. I'm gonna try to. Okay, good. So I can use a translation service. I can also detect the language that I'm using, and there's a whole host of other things I can do. There's a huge guide here. You can go through it and pick whatever one picks your fancy or suits your fancy. So that's for translation. I'm curious what else we can do. So so if I go back to Quick Start, there's a whole host of other things I can do. I think it might be interesting to try to analyze some images. So let's do that. Okay, so specifically in computer vision, we have a bunch of things that we enable you to do. You can use OCR, which is optical character recognition. So given a picture of something, of a character, it'll tell you what the character is. You can detect objects and images. You can apply contact tags to images. Let's see if there's one that what was the one that I used the last time? I think it was, hang on, sorry. I'm gonna try to remember what I did last time. It was, I think it was translation, speech language. It was a really cool one that I wanted to show y'all. I think it was computer vision. All right, let me see if I can remember what it was. Detect faces and images. You know what, let's do that. Let's detect objects and images. Okay, let's get started with that. So prerequisites, an Azure subscription. You do have that, ak.ms/sfx Azure. You have Python, and we have to create a resource for it, which I don't think, no, which I did, sorry. So now it asks you to set it up. So I'm going to set it up. I'm going to copy this code. So pip, for those who are not aware, it's a way for Python to get fresh packages or different packages that you may not have installed on your machine. So I'm going to copy that in here, wait for it to install. Wake up. There we go. Oh, I've already installed stuff. But pip will allow me to pull in new packages if I don't already have them. So I'm going to go back, and then I can install Pillow. That sounds nice at 10 a.m. on a Saturday. I'm going to put that in there. I already have that. Okay, so now I'm going to create a whole new application. So let me go ahead and do that. Post it. All right, so this is how I start. So for those of you who are not aware of Python, this is effectively how you bring in new packages. It's sort of like hash includes in C++ and C, sort of like imports in Java. So you have these things that you can import. All right, what else is the guide asking me to do? The guide is also asking me to use my Azure endpoint and key. All right, it's gonna be the same thing as last time. So I'm gonna go over to my API or my service. I'm going to grab the key, going to plonk it in there. Also going to use an endpoint. I'm going to plonk that in there too. Okay, let's jump in. All right, let's go back. So it says, all right, create variables for your resources, Azure endpoint and key. And so now I can do a whole host of things. So I can, oh yes, there we go. I can analyze an image. So here's the image that we'll be using for our demo. Okay, great. So I have a URL to an image. What exactly is this URL? Let's go check it out. Always be suspicious of links on the internet. Phishing is real, guys. Okay, so it looks like it's the Coliseum. Cool. All right, let's see what happens if I try to use the demo code that they've provided. So I'm just going to copy this whole thing, which will supposed to give me a description of the image. So I'm just going to paste that in there. So looking at it really quickly. Oh, I actually have to set up the client. Sorry, I forgot. I think I might have missed a step. that would have been here. Yeah, there we go. I definitely skipped that. So I'm gonna go and put that back in here. So really quickly, I put my subscription key in, the endpoint I'm gonna ask questions of, because remember, when you access a service, this is the service that you need to access, but you also need to provide it a key. So the service knows that you are legit. And then you create a client, and now you're providing the URL of the image that you're trying to access. And this code, all of this code is gonna just tell you what exactly the image is. Okay, let me save that out. Let me run it. I'm gonna clear the screen and yeah. Describe an image. Oh, it's a large stone structure with many arches with the Colosseum in the background with 26% confidence, which I think is really cool. You know what? Let's actually go somewhere else. sfx.io. Let's pick a random image there. So let's take the logo. I'm going to copy the image link. I'm going to plonk that here. And let's see what comes up. It's a logo with the company name. Sure. And it's 100% confident, which is pretty cool. It's already able to do that with just a brand new image. Let's scroll down and see what else I can do. I'm gonna pick someone on the, just randomly someone on the About Us team. Just gonna copy that person over. Then I'm gonna place it here. Okay. Let's see what it does. It's a man wearing glasses with, 50% confidence. That's pretty awesome. So like I'm showing this predominantly to showcase exactly what we can do now with machine learning. We have come so far in the machine learning space that we're able to do things like this. We're not just able to describe images. We're also able to get a description, get a category for the image, get tags for the images, and there are so many things that we can do. So you can imagine being able to use this for any application that you want to hack today or hack today and tomorrow. So I'm just putting this out there as different things that you can explore that you'd like. All right, so I think we're good with the demo of the image detector. There's one more thing I wanted to bring up, which was a demo of using a web app with Python Flask. Okay. So what is Python Flask? So Python Flask is a Python framework that allows you to spin up web apps really quickly and really easily. It's very lightweight. In contrast to Django, which it's not necessarily as lightweight, but it's also one of the more popular ones out there. I'm going to use Flask because I'm more familiar with it, but we also do support web app with Django. So I'm going to pull that up. Okay, so where was I? So if you go to templates, as you might know, there we go. As I said, we do support Python Django, but I'm going to go straight to Python Flask for now. Gonna deploy it. And I'm going to add it to the same folder that I just created earlier. My region is West US, that's fine. I'm closer to the West US anyway. Gonna create it.
John, someone in the chat has a question.
Oh, cool. Let me try and see that. What's the question?
We can also say it to you just because there's a bunch of chat.
Yes, please. If you can tell me what is the question?
So Leonardo says, is there a way to get it to tell you more descriptions like 1, man wearing glasses, 2, dressed in dark colors, 3, background color X? Like, is that possible?
That's a great question, Leonardo. I don't know. Off the top of my head, I don't think so, because I don't know if we've gotten that far in the machine learning space to be able to do that. What I would imagine that you could do with, so we can probably break that question up into smaller pieces. If you wanted to detect the color of the person's shirt, that might be doable. I would say that in that case, you may, if I were to guess, it's just a guess as to what I would do. I would take the picture of the man or the person, and then I would remove their face and then try to detect the predominant color of the rest of the image. That could be a thing that you would do. But I would probably do some more research as to whether or not we've actually come that far in the machine learning space to be able to do that. hopefully that answers your question. But I think last I heard, I don't think we can do that just yet. But you can always do some research to try to figure out if that's possible. And also you can just hack your way around it. Be like, okay, there's a person in this image, and if you're concerned about what color of clothes they're wearing, you can probably just try to take the majority color of the image as a hacky way of doing it. It's probably not going to be perfect, but that's what I think is the case. Yeah, that's my guess. Hopefully that answers that, but feel free to leave some follow-up questions if you have it.
Thank you, John.
Of course. Are there any other questions before I jump back here?
Thanks, Queen.
Hey. Okay, so I've deployed my specific resource for my web app with Python Flask. So I'm just going to go over to the resource group. And then I'm going to go to my Flask thing that I just created. Okay. Oh, good. Look, there's a quick start tab. I love that we have quick start tabs. All right. So let's go to our quick start guide. All right, quick start. Create a Python app using an Azure app service on Linux. Cool. All right. So it says set up my initial environment, have an Azure account with an active subscription, which by this point you all know where to go to get that. You can install Python, which I do. You can install this if you need to. I don't think I needed to. All right, I'm going to clone the sample code. So I don't know why I'm doing that. I'm just going to copy, git clone. Gonna get a copy of that repository into my location, and if I dir, I do have it there. It's Python docs hello world. This is the copy of the repository that I just created with git clone. So I'm just gonna jump back in, and I'm gonna get a sample. All right, so I'm gonna cd into it. I'm gonna do Flask run. All right, so I'm gonna cd into Python. Actually, I'm gonna cls. There we go. Python docs hello world, and if I do Flask run, great, now I have a web server. This is really fast. That's cool. So if I go to this localhost, I'm just gonna copy that over and then paste it in my browser. There we go. I just created a local web server, and I can do things with it. So if you don't want to go here, you can always go to localhost, and I think that will also get you there. Yeah. So what is the code that actually underlies this? Let's actually explore that. So if I were to open the file, the folder, so I jump into Python docs hello world, there's something called app.py, right? And app.py is pretty much the powerhouse code that does all of this. You can see that all you have to do is import Flask and then set up an app. And then there are other things that you can do with Flask, and I will refer to the Flask documentation for further questions about it. But you can say things like, okay, every time you get something that is, every time you get just the home page requests, you should return hello world. So I'm just going to change that to be hello sfhacks. So if I go back, I have to redeploy. Sorry, I have to rerun. I'm just going to cancel it. Kill the server. Okay, I'm going to run the server again. Okay, so now if I go back to localhost, hey, I changed it. Okay, what if I wanted to do something specifically for sfhacks? Well, I can do that too. I can say every time someone says sf-hacks, I'm going to say, hello, you have found the special page. I'm just gonna, I'm gonna kill my server. I'm gonna rerun it. Oh, I guess I did the thing. Oh, sorry, should have hello too. Fine. Great. All right, let's go back here and do localhost 5000. That's still the same as always, but if I do /sf-hacks, you found the special page. All right, so this is great for starting off a web app locally on your own machine. And there are various documentation online available to deploy your Flask app, deploy your Flask web app so that everyone can see it and not just you, because right now localhost is local. to your machine.
John,
Yes.
I had a question. Is it okay if I?
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead. Harshvir, is it?
Yeah, you
Yeah,
can call me Harsh.
Harsh, yeah. How's it?
Thank you so much for giving us your time, first of all, and thank you so much, SF Hacks, for organizing this. So my question is more, you could say, architectural.
Mm-hmm.
For example, we did an endpoint which would tell us about an image,
Mm-hmm.
and then we did a Flask app which could return stuff.
Yeah.
Now we could do a Flask app that actually authenticates a user,
Mm-hmm.
brings logs him in or whatever, and then the user tries to make a call to, or that service tries to make a call to the machine learning endpoint.
Mm-hmm.
At this point, with respect to call it security, would you try to authenticate every request that is going to the machine learning endpoint, and how would you do it?
So
because that is basically back channel propagation, right?
Okay, so there are a couple of elements to that question there. So I'm going to try to parse that real quick. So I'm unfortunately not familiar with the phrase back channel propagation, but I'm going to guess it's
it's basically your backend making a call to the machine endpoint. But what if somehow that endpoint gets leaked out and you want to make sure that it doesn't get bombarded with multiple requests by somebody who's trying to do like a DDoS, or just spring up your monthly bills in that case?
That's a good question.
You will not get DDoSed, but you could end up paying a lot of money.
Right. So this sounds, as you pointed out, this does sound like an architectural question. So I don't have a complete answer for you yet. I'm going to say that I like the idea of logging someone in. I like the idea of having sort of like someone log in, and then you can keep track of the number of requests they make and sort of like cap them out. And so if they end up, so if you lock someone, then you already know they're part of the system and they're alive and doing things. So you can always sort of like keep a counter as a number of requests that they are trying to do, and you can cap them. That's one way. That's one way that I would approach it. That's I say that's probably the first way I would do.
I was thinking of like maintaining a contract between two microservices, for example, and the machine learning endpoint just authenticates this is a valid request coming from the user, that it's an actual user and it's not somebody just sitting on Postman.
Right.
So is there a way to do it?
Oh, is there a way to make sure that we're authentic?
Like, I know the concept, but I don't know how to do it.
Right. It's a great question. I don't know. I'm going to ask Sammy, do you happen to know of any way to do that?
Not from the top of my top of my mind. I'm looking something up. Give me like 5 minutes. I might have an answer.
Yep.
If anything, the answer can also be mentioned in the Discord channel, so that way if anyone else has
I don't
these
want
questions,
to take everybody's time, but thank you so much for hearing me out, and I hope to hear back from you on Discord, probably.
That's fine. Yeah.
I hope to have a wonderful session with you. Thank you so much.
No problem. Thank you for asking the question. That's a great question. Hopefully we'll get back to you as soon as we can today in the Discord channel.
All right.
Yep. Actually, that's a good timing because I think that's the end of what I had to show. It's the end of this session that I had planned. Just want to say best of luck to you all, you amazing hackers. Again, it's aka.ms/sfhacksazure for getting your free credit, and aka.ms/sfhackseducation to learn to do more with Azure. But aside from that, that's Harshvir got us started with questions. So I'm going to open the floor to a couple of questions about Azure or Microsoft. So bear in mind, I'm also a relative beginner to Azure, so we learn together. But if you don't have any questions about Azure, I'm also happy to take questions about Microsoft itself, like working at Microsoft in particular. I'm gonna try to open up the
anyone was in the AGA workshop last night, maybe you could ask the same type of questions to John for Microsoft since.
What does the day-to-day look like now, considering the pandemic? Has it affected your, I guess, your day-to-day as an employee, as a software engineer that much, or no?
Okay, so the question was, how has the pandemic affected my day-to-day? Whoops. Okay, am I still sharing the screen? Or no, I did. I stopped doing that. Okay.
You stopped.
All right, I'm just gonna share screen real quick. So the question was, how has the pandemic changed my working? It has, honestly, the fact that my job is mostly software means that I'm able to work anywhere remotely, and I've sort of been taking advantage of that even before the pandemic. I think the major thing that we had to get accustomed to was that all of us were online now, and we had to, like, set up meetings if we wanted to get anything done in terms of just conversations that we would normally have in hallways. And I think also Microsoft as a company has become more and more okay with having people work from home full-time. So like literally, I think near the end of last year, Microsoft said that, hey, if you wanted to, you could work from home full-time as well. So I think it's one of the few companies that's already doing that. Things would have been in the hallway, in-person kind of conversation. Yeah.
You cut out there for a sec.
And for a little bit.
I think you cut out again.
Welcome back. John?
Hi, am I back?
Oh, yes.
Okay, so the last thing we heard was you do not get to have hallway conversations because of Zoom.
Hi, yes, Zoom just crashed on me. Sorry.
Happens to everyone. Okay, Kevin, did you get your answer?
Yes, I did.
Okay, let's open it up to more questions. There are quite a few of us in here, so yeah, this is the time to.
Ask away anything you want to ask to someone from Microsoft. He'll answer the best he can.
I can ask. So what's the first, for badges, for Microsoft, what's the first introductory badge you would suggest a college student to pursue?
So can you clarify what you mean by batches?
Like certifications. I guess you have like for Azure and MS365. So yeah.
Okay, that's a good question. I think, so unfortunately, I'm not very well aware of what certifications we provide. Also, I would imagine it would depend on what you're trying to do. So in terms of, if you're asking the question of what you would need to be able to become a software engineer at Microsoft, I would say that some of the courses that I found useful for my interviews are, so data structures were a very crucial class. Machine structures is also a great class to take. You have algorithms is another great class that you can take. I think those three end up being classes that I would recommend every student takes if they're thinking of applying for a software engineering job. But in terms of certifications that we provide, I would say it's very job specific. Like I know there are some jobs for which knowledge of Azure, for example, is crucial. So you can go ahead and take those certifications up. I know, for instance, that there are, actually, I think that's, yeah, I know that, for example, jobs in some IT departments will require certifications. So I would take those certifications as well. So it really depends on what you're trying to achieve. Does that answer your question?
Yes, of course. I really liked how you stated the classes, and I think I'll pursue those. And also, can we connect with you on LinkedIn?
Yes, feel free to do that. Yep, we own LinkedIn. So yeah.
Any other questions? Oh.
Dennis asked, what languages do you speak?
Okay, what languages do I speak? Well, English. Reasonably well, with an ability to get around and not get my kidney stolen. I'm kidding about the kidney stolen part. Hindi, I would say. Hindi and Tagalog. Well enough to at least get around.
But also, Dennis, do you mean programming languages or like actual languages?
Actual languages.
Actually,
You're a linguistic, so.
and I'm sort of, I have varying levels of knowledge for French, German, Spanish, Esperanto, Arabic, and Japanese. So very, very varying levels of knowledge there. It's sort of a hobby of mine to try to learn as many as I can. Trouble is learning it and starting off a language, but then also pushing through and actually being able to carry conversation are very different battles. But yes, I do also speak Python, yes.
How do you learn the languages? Like Duolingo or something?
Yes, I cannot recommend Duolingo highly enough. It's a great place to start your learning for language learning. I've also found Hello Chinese useful for Mandarin. There's a bunch of other apps out there, but Duolingo is my personal rec. Also taking a couple of classes, but yeah. So Ahmed asks, what is your day-to-day life like during this time as a software engineer? So I answered this question before, but I can do a little bit of summary now. It's not that different, thankfully, because my job was anyway sort of things that I could do remotely, because all I have to do is remote into a machine, and that machine is on campus, but I don't have to be. So I could work from anywhere. It's just that I think the biggest change that I can see is that I'm in meetings a lot. And I think that's because we don't really have a good replacement for those in-person, fortuitous hallway conversations to happen.
But can you still go to the office, or you cannot?
We cannot, yes. So Microsoft has its own version of phases. So I know a lot of geographies have their version of like, red phase or purple phase or phase 1, phase 2. We also have our versions of phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. And so our particular office is in phase 2, which is mandatory work from home.
Okay.
What do you miss the most about not being able to go into the office?
I miss just seeing people. I think there's a difference between seeing them on the screen versus seeing them in person. Yeah, I miss being able to interact. I also miss just bumping into people, which you can't really do that well online. Unless one of you is hacking a solution for it right now in SF Hacks. Right now, there's not a great way for us to just meet up and talk. It's always like we have to schedule some time and block away some time just to do that, which feels very forced, at least for me.
To add to that, at my office, we also have, we used to have Bagel Fridays, and I do really miss that.
Oh, yay. Yeah. Yep. Do you think in the future, so go ahead.
Oh no, I was just gonna bump up that question, which you already started reading.
Oh yeah, so Justin Co asks, do you think in the future that meetings will take place in VR or AR? I think so. I mean, I know we're just now released something called Microsoft Mesh, which is supposed to be AR. I would suspect that there will be a growing number of meetings that will happen in VR, AR land. I don't think all meetings will happen that way, but I can definitely see a future where that's a possibility. I'm glad you're enjoying it, Harshveer. I'm glad you're enjoying Mesh. Yeah, it does sound like Ready Player One for work.
So can we see the cat?
Oh, she's sleeping. I kind of don't want to wake her up. Sorry. Cat parents know that when the cat goes to sleep, you should probably let them sleep.
Hey, if there are no further questions, then we can take a group photo, but I just want to give everyone a chance one more time.
I might have one again.
Go ahead.
So, John, if we are pursuing for more like a project manager role at Microsoft, would you be willing to connect us to other employees who could guide us?
Yes, and also I should point out that we do have something called the Explore program, or at least we did. I don't know if it's still a thing, but the Explore program or the Explorer program, not to be confused with Internet Explorer, is sort of a program where we have first years and second years in college. They can apply for something that's like an internship. but isn't really. So an internship is basically a 3-month position with the same role. In the Explorer program, you are able to bounce around from position to position. So you have six weeks or 1.5 months as a software engineer and 6 weeks as a program manager. So that way, if you're not sure which one of the two you want to do, you can pick one. You can be like, okay, I'm going to try 6 weeks as a software engineer and see how that goes. I'm going to try 6 weeks as a program manager and see how those go. And then you can sort of choose which one you like for the future. So that's a great way to get some exposure. So I highly recommend that if you're a first year or second year, definitely check out the Explore program, which I hope is still a thing. But yes, I can try to connect you with program managers if you have questions specifically about program management. And for those of you who are not aware what program management is, it's sort of the other side of the software engineering process, other but equally important, where they're the ones who sort of manage the various engineering projects that happen within a team. So they usually have so many projects that they're coordinating with, and they coordinate with the engineers on those teams to make sure that the projects are landing and are releasing on time. Generally, we expect our program managers to have a technical background also.
Okay, thank you. That answered my question.
Ahmed asks, what are your thoughts on quantum computing and where does Microsoft stand on that area? Ahmed, that's a great question because quantum computing is actually something that I'm looking into right now. It's my quarantine hobby. I think quantum computing has a lot of promise. I believe that there is a lot to gain if we're able to pull it off. I think we're pretty close to pulling off a quantum computer that's large enough for other people to use besides researchers, because I know researchers have small quantum computers. So I think we're really close to being able to scale it up. It might take a couple of years, but I definitely think that's the future. Microsoft is a big player in that space, as far as I'm aware. I know we were trying to develop our own quantum computers I know there's at least Google, IBM, and Microsoft, and they're all doing quantum computers. And I know that they're all doing quantum computers in very different ways. Like there are apparently different approaches to actually implementing a quantum computer. But there is a difference between implementing a quantum computer and actually coding for a quantum computer. So I believe that Microsoft has something called Q#. So I recommend you look it up. It's called Q#, which also uses Azure, by the way. And that allows you to build quantum programs. So the idea here is, yes, we might not necessarily have real working quantum computers, but that doesn't mean that we can't start writing programs for them. And so Q# is a way for you to actually write quantum programs that you can eventually, at some point, run on an actual computer. But for right now, we have simulators that simulate quantum computers. So that's something that I would recommend. If you have interests in quantum computing, Q# is our offering there. Okay, so I think I'll wrap up the question with these last two questions from Ahmed and Harsh. So can I give an example of how quantum computing is useful? And also Harsh asks, how's quantum computing different from regular computing? So I'm going to tie those questions together because they are related. So the difference between quantum computing and regular computing is sort of, at a very basic level, it's what you use to compute. So regular conventional computing uses binary digits or bits, so 0 or 1. So a binary digit is either off or it's on. In quantum computing, you have something called qubits. So that's QU bits. So they're quantum bits. Instead of 0 or 1, these quantum bits are in a weird superposition of 0 and 1. So that's a big word to throw in there right now. But think of it as a qubit is sort of like, with some probability, it's 0, and with some probability, it's 1. So unlike a regular bit for which you know its value is 0 and for which you know its value is 1, a qubit is either 0 or 1 depending on when you measure it and how. Now that's weird, right? It's weird that that's a thing that you can do, and it's weird that that's useful. But it turns out that that's really useful because it means that we can do everything today that is exponential time for a regular computer you can do it really quickly on a quantum computer. So essentially, quantum computing means that you're able to do applications that are usually take a long time. You can do them really quickly. So one of the biggest things is for machine learning. When you train models for machine learning, nowadays they sometimes, depending on the size of the model, they take days to train. With a quantum computer, the promise is to train them within hours or minutes. They're also useful for biotechnology, being able to come up with new drugs, being able to come up with new compounds that will help with various diseases. They're also useful for quantum cryptography. So potentially you could break factoring with quantum computers. So there's a whole host of applications you can use with quantum computing. I would encourage you to look it up. There's a bunch of courses online that you can take to get a better understanding of what it means for a qubit to be sometimes 0 and sometimes 1, and why is that useful. It's very interesting. Yeah, Ahmed, yes. I don't know if it'll be a thing of the past. I don't know if algorithmic time complexities will be a thing of the past. I believe we'll always need to know what the time complexities of things are. I just don't think it'll be as much of a factor anymore. But yeah. All right, I think we should probably wrap up. If you have any other questions about Azure or Microsoft, feel free to dump them in the Discord channel. We'll be there monitoring it. So, but otherwise, I'm gonna hand it back.